Okay. Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk about COVID-19 and your commissions plan. This is the latest in the series of online webinars that Power Matrix has really just been trying to bring to the retail energy industry. This morning, our agenda is really just, we'll go through a quick intro for those of you who aren't familiar with either Power Matrix and our suite of capabilities or the craft team. Quick intro. We'll talk about COVID-19 and the impacts and kind of interplays it's having with commission plans. We wanted to, Dave and I have so many years working in this sort of commissions area. We've seen a lot of crazy stuff. We thought we might share some crazy commission plan ideas that we've seen. And then we'll open up for Q&A. Again, Zoom has this nice little Q&A capability. If you wouldn't mind, as questions come up or come to mind, submit your questions through that Q&A. And then, of course, we'll wrap up. As you know, we've been doing almost a weekly webinar since COVID kind of hit the industry, or since kind of the stay-at-home orders came out, just as a goal of kind of keeping some content flowing and keeping the conversation going while, you know, we're all kind of working from home. I'm actually working from an inn in the Texas Hill Country today, and I did a quick speed test on my internet this morning. I have less than 3 megabits. So for any of those techies out there, that's not very much. So we're sipping internet today, and thanks to Zoom for keeping it sounding good for you guys. Next week, we're going to look specifically at the supplier world. Got John Bennett, who's VP of C&I Sales and Marketing at Energy Harbor. Probably many of you know John, many years at Constellation, and just a guy that's been very present in the industry and also in the channel and the sales world for many years. Really interesting to hear his point of view. And he and the Energy Harbor team are really in launch mode, and it will be great to kind of just hear their perspective of you know, entering the market, you know, post First Energy. And we'll also have a couple of other suppliers on that panel, and that will be again next Thursday at 9:30 a.m. We've got kind of a backlog of topics, thanks to everyone who's submitted ideas. Really would love to continue to get those ideas. If there's a topic you'd like to hear about, if you'd like to be a speaker even, let us know. We would love to hear from you and consider that as we kind of continue this series, as long as it makes sense in the industry. I want to say thanks again. TIPA has been very gracious in sharing the content, sharing these webinars out in the TIPA community. If you don't know TIPA, we have been a member almost since inception. We were the first affiliate member many years ago, and last year TIPA instituted an Affiliate of the Year award. We were humbled and proud at the same time to accept that award, and proud to be really at the forefront of thought leadership in the retail energy industry with our community in TIPA. So thank you very much to TIPA for the support. Good morning, Jason. Thanks for joining.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Today the presenters are going to be myself, Nate Richards, CFO of Power Matrix, and David Watson, and Dave is head of Craft. And both of us have been in this commissions world for many years. We've seen a lot of crazy plans. And we imagine many of the attendees today, you've seen a lot of crazy plans. And Dave, you want to kind of talk about this, this giveaway here?
Yeah, we thought it'd be fun. Like as Nate and I have gone back and forth, we couldn't even pick out the craziest plans, frankly. They got pretty basic, and I think there's so many different iterations. We figured it'd be more fun to hear from you about what your definition of crazy is. So as we go through the Q&A, hope you guys can submit, you know, without getting too detailed and specific, what you think your crazy plans are. And maybe we'll use Jason as the unbiased voter to look at the plans, and then what we'll do is we'll grab your email and we'll ship you an Uber Eats card so you could enjoy our lovely work at home world and get some good food along the way.
There you go. So if you don't mind, if you have an idea of a crazy plan that you've seen, Submit it via the Q&A. We'll review those, and David will buy you lunch via remote. No Zoom required. So pretty cool. Thanks, Dave and the craft team for putting that out there. Really quickly, as an intro to Power Matrix, our core purpose as an organization is connecting people through technology to increase trust in retail energy markets. And we really think that connected people do great things, that technology really is a means, not an end, and that increasing trust is critical to the survival and thriving of retail energy markets. And we really believe that retail energy markets are the best way to serve the consumer and all participants. Our vision about where our product suite kind of takes retail energy is really just a connected ecosystem. There are so many participants in this industry, but very few actual connections. And we think that there's a lot of efficiency that can be brought by bringing people together, and that whether they build their own solutions or use our solutions, we just want to be able to connect the industry, and we feel like there's a lot of improvement for all participants by creating a connected ecosystem. Just a quick kind of visual on our connected ecosystem today. As many of you know, we have Sparkplug, which is our broker cloud platform. This enables really all aspects of brokerage. And if you think of brokerage more broadly as aggregations, brokers, consultants, community choice, basically anybody who is client-facing, sales, managing agents, or managing aggregations, this is our platform that is a turnkey experience, whether it's an agent portal, a customer front end, et cetera, allowing self-service or high-end C&I sales for that broker channel. On the supplier side, there are many great billing, EDI, risk, hedging, credit sort of systems, forecasting, but we haven't really seen one, and I think the industry's been missing this ability to sort of stitch all that together, and as well as capturing sort of the pre-deal workflow. And that's what Propeller is. Propeller is really a way to manage all of the data and sort of state that you have to keep up with prior to enrollment, as well as a way to sort of move data back and forth between supplier and broker, between supplier and agent. And one of the cool things about Propeller is that it's very pluggable. Our philosophy is to integrate and become a participant in an ecosystem within a supplier. And for the commissions piece, we've really felt like Craft has far and away got the best product. We're very excited to be able to work with the Craft team. I think our philosophies and experience on commissions are very aligned, and for that reason, we're excited to have Dave, and also to just announce in a way that we're working with Craft on the supplier commission side. Just again, background, why are we qualified to talk about commissions? I started probably the first, if not the first, broker commission management platform 14 years ago called Core. And since then, and through a merger with Power Matrix, we now manage 78 terawatt hours. This is from last fall, trailing 12 months procurement. It's just a massive amount of volume. You're looking at $100 to $200 million a year in brokerage commissions. So we're managing a lot of commissions. It's a very material volume of transactions. And so for this reason, we get to see a lot of different plans. And again, we're also supporting a wide variety of what we call brokers, right? The channel, agents, aggregators, brokers, sales, and so forth. And really what we hear time and time again is that commissions are fake news, right? There's this sort of lack of trust, getting back to what our company purpose is about commissions in the channel. This sense of, I have to constantly be watching my suppliers to make sure that I'm catching the mistakes and pointing them out so that I can get paid accurately. Now, I won't get into one side or the other, but I think the takeaway here is that we can all do better in how we handle, calculate, reconcile commissions. And so if you think about, if you're not familiar with Sparkplug or with Craft, you think about what Dave and I do, one component of what we do, and really everything that Craft is about, it's really about, we're kind of the backcheck.org, if you will, on commissions, right? We want to kind of be the version of the truth that is trusted, whether it's suppliers calculating commissions correctly and paying brokers accurately, or on spark plugs, receiving those commission statements, matching them with deal flow, reconciling them with a forecast, and sort of producing back a reconciliation statement. So
yeah, Nate, I'd also say part of what we're trying to do is establish that balance, right? Is to make sure that you're finding that optimal commission plan that incents the sellers as well as is the right thing to acquire customers. So I think there's a great way to optimize that so it's a win-win for everyone instead of making it any kind of controversial look. So.
Okay, perfect. So let's, with that, I'd love David to do a quick intro on who Craft is, where they came from, and tell us a little more about Craft.
Yeah, Nate and Jason, thanks for having us. Looking forward to keep working with you guys, especially when we get together live. I feel like EMC was the last time we all got to see each other and shake hands and not do the elbow touch or the 6 foot distance wave from everyone. So looking forward to seeing you all live again at some point. But real quick background. So Parveda Solutions is the company that's been around for about 18 years, where Craft is owned by. So Parveda itself has 10 offices all around the U.S., 1 in Toronto. Craft is a business unit within Parveda. So we're a little software company inside of a much larger consulting company. Parveda itself has been in the retail industry for over a decade, dozens of customers, lots of projects, hundreds of projects. And in fact, probably half a dozen times or more, we've actually been asked to come in and say, hey, here's this spreadsheet jungle of commissions. Can you help us? This just isn't working for us. We're spending way too much money and time trying to make spreadsheets and SQL databases work for us to manage our commissions plan. So we built the commissions platform over and over and over until finally someone said, hey, you guys should just build a little software company around this. So about 3 years ago, we built Craft as a software solution to go to the marketplace with. So as you saw the image that Nate depicted, commissions is obviously a small part of the bigger, broader picture, but we only do commissions. Like, that's our focus, compensation management and everything we can do around it. So we're really the only commissions platform out there that was built specifically for the retail energy industry. There's some others that kind of get, screwed in and fit and try to make work, but we're the ones that understand retail industry from the bottom up. So like it says here, it's 100% of our focus.
Fantastic.
Go on to the next.
Yeah, so again, today we really want to focus on, now having done some introductions, what are we seeing as two kind of companies that are really at the nexus of the commissions world, either on the broker side or on the supplier side? How are we seeing COVID-19? What are you seeing, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, this is just, our customers are talking to us and telling them what they're starting to see. I mean, there's some things that are out there, on a national front. I think you've got a slide later that talks about door-to-door sales, right? That's not happening anymore. What's going on there? We're only starting to see some of the initial impacts, but these are just some of the high-level bullets, right? You can't do the door-to-door, so how are people shifting to leverage digital marketing? How are they using Zoom marketing like we're doing right now? How do you get on Zooms and be able to talk to people? In-store marketing, that's going to vary based on what are the rules. If you're in a Costco or a Walmart location, there's not a standard model anymore. They might say, hey, if you have to have the social distancing, maybe you have to be outside under a tent instead of inside in the store. So even that's changing. And then I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is just the historical usage. We know what it used to be like, but COVID is so ambiguous and we don't understand it. It's literally what's the new normal. I kind of get sick of hearing what the new normal is, but the reality is we don't know what the new normal is. You talk to people about residential usage. The old model was, oh, well, it looks like what the weekends used to be. But, my kids, I've got, 2 kids that are, trying to be Zoom calls on class. Someone else in the house is using Wi-Fi. And, if you're where Nate is and you only get 3 megabit power, it's tough to have 3 Zoom calls going at the same time. So that usage isn't even consistent. And then small and medium business is brutal in some cases, right? Some of those businesses are totally shuttered. Other cases, they're trying to figure out what the new normal is based on whether you're essential or not. And that varies by state, who's defining what essential is. So that's impacting the small and medium business market. And then C&I is huge, right? Depending on who you are. If you're a commercial office building, you could be empty. The The one that we're in Seattle happens to be occupied by Virginia Mason, which is a healthcare organization. So that one is mostly operational. But how do you know that? You have to go piece by piece. So it's pretty much just changing everywhere. The historical usage, I guess, just does not apply. And then compensation, the initial thing we're seeing is a shift away from a lot of the old ideas of doing upfronts to residual, just because we don't know what it looks like. How do you say, oh, the 12 months looking forward is going to look like this? We don't know what it looks like. What if the next wave hits and stuff shuts down? So it's tough to look at it. I don't know, Nate, you have any other thoughts of what you've seen and heard?
Great. Well, we actually we took some interesting data. So obviously, having been serving the broker community for many years, we've got some really good trend data. We took kind of, if you're familiar with, if you listen to Wall Street earnings, they talk about same-store sales. So this is sort of our equivalent of same-store sales, kind of indexed on a normalized quantity. So if we think about deal output per brokerage, in 2019, we sort of see this trend. And here's 2020. So in 2019, you see this sort of accelerating. You see it sort of continuing in 2020, and it's kind of same store sales, same brokerage sales. Now, this is by quantity of deals. It doesn't take into account the volumetric component or term of deals. So we're just going on signed deal count. And the other thing is, I would say, is April probably isn't fully in. I would say there's some firms probably still putting in April deals. So I would expect the April number to come out. I don't think it's truly half of last year's April, but I think we do see just a telling trend here that the volume of closings, without respect to the size of the deals or the dollar value of the deals, is definitely down year over year, and we can see that quantified. I think another thing is we're looking at the commission plan structure. So taking this same kind of normalized year-over-year deal set, if we look at those that have a monthly residual looking commission plan, and there are actually a number of flavors of monthly residual. Some pay at the beginning of the month, some pay at the end of the month, some pay once the bill's collected, some pay bill collected plus some net terms. But if we sort of call that monthly residual, and we take everything else and put it in a sort of an other, meaning there's some upfront component, some accelerated component, could be quarterly, annual, and so forth. When we look at sort of monthly versus other, you can see that there's a pretty stable 2/3 of our sort of normalized broker deals that are closed on a monthly residual. And I think what we can see is there's a significant trend up from something that's normally very stable around 2/3 up to closer to 80%. As of the month of April. So we definitely see an uptick in the overall monthly residual versus upfront. But what we don't see is 100%. So we don't see that just every supplier across the board is locked down. There's still those paying upfront. And so, a couple of interesting takeaways from the data here.
Yeah, so the idea behind this slide is just to talk about how we've seen commission plans evolve over time. So kind of in the middle, you see, at first everything's easy. It could be simple as a residual or an upfront type of plan. And then you add another layer of complexity and another layer of complexity and another layer of complexity. And next thing you know, they get pretty hard and complex, but it's all situational, right? On the left-hand side, just as we've worked with, you find that the folks that are in the operations side, and they're the ones that have to build out the spreadsheets, COO level operations commissions folks like to see plans that are simple, easier, more template based, and pretty much standard across the org. You start getting into the middle side where the financial folks want to look at it and willing to get a little more complex to avoid some risk, reduce risk for the business, and do what's right for the customers at the same time. Where I grew up in the world of sales and technology, where it's like, hey, it could be the wild, wild west. You got to do what you need to secure, short and long-term agreements with your customers. So I don't really care how hard or difficult the comp plan is. If it's incenting the right way and incenting the right behavior, let's put that in place and make it work for everyone, right? Because at the end of the day, it's acquiring customers is what we all want to do and keep them happy. So if I can come up with a crazy comp plan that allows us to do that, it's a win-win.
Right.
On the right-hand side, there's some things that definitely, situations that impact the complexity of commission plans. Seasonalities, it's pretty easy to understand that. I'm fairly certain no matter what happens with the world right now, if I'm in Texas in August, it's going to be hot. I don't think we're going to get snow in Texas in August. And I'm pretty sure if I'm up in the Northeast in January, I'm going to need some warm clothes. Occasionally you get that warm heat wave, but seasonalities we understand based on historical usage. Then there's kind of medium impacts like Hurricane Harvey. It was tragic and what happened with that, but it was a bell curve of a recovery. We understand eventually how to get back and, kind of get back to a normal. With COVID, it's going to be really hard. Like no one understands this. Like we literally don't. You can go look at what happened with the Spanish flu 100 years ago, but we're in a different place in the world. So there is no historical perspective to use. So that's why we just feel these plans could get more complex over time.
Fantastic. And we did a fun sort of exercise here. You might see this. Sometimes sales guys will refer to this as an eye chart. This is an eye slide. There are so many commission plans. So we just said, hey, what are all the plans these are live in production? Every single one's been used on at least one deal since inception. And as you can tell, it's just an overwhelming amount of plans that can be done and different levels of complexity, kind of speaking to that last slide. As we look to kind of adjust how can we accelerate dollars to sort of create incentivization, and yet also balance that with financing realities, balance that with customer needs and budgets. So, Dave, why don't you tell us?
Yeah, I think we'll go back on that. Just for fun, I think we originally talked, and I think one of the first discussions was let's do the David Letterman style top 10 list. And I think when you and Jason and I were talking about it, it's impossible to figure out what that looks like. What are those top 10? There's so many to choose from. So what we chose to do is kind of sum up, just kind of using this kind of little slider, easier to medium, just in how you look at it. And the next one talks to hard. Our intent isn't to go through every one of these, but obviously you've got the bread and butter plans. Everyone looks at, a residual and upfront, and then you start to get a little bit more complex there. We've had some folks like on the second one, residual, they wanted to incent an aggressive sales force. And they said, hey, if it's above 80 in Texas in August, I want to get people that are going to go out. So I'm going to give a little extra incentive to go out and do the door-to-door. This would be a pre-COVID world. And likewise, if I want to go out and hit the streets in New Jersey or New York in the middle of the winter, I'm going to incent them. If we see the negative or we hear the wind chill factor, I'm going to throw something else out there on top of whatever the standard plan is to incent them. So we're seeing some different things like that. Depending on where you are, a lot of people are trying to provide different incentives for green power versus brown power. Obviously, that varies by, the supplier and what you're looking at. There's starting to mix like that, probably 6 buttons down where it's a percent to percent annual upfront with residual. Now we're starting to blend plans and you're coming and saying, well, over a certain time, I'm going to start this way and then move it to this way. So we just see plans starting to overlay and mix and match and work. So, this is just kind of some initial ways of looking at some complex plans. I don't know, Nate, you've got that big one. Any comments real quick?
Yeah, we've seen some wild plans over the years, some with, maybe you have a large, especially around sort of special deals. Maybe I'll say, you might call it a plan, but it's really kind of like a one-off agreement around typically kind of a special deal. Now, we don't really look at which plans are used on which deals, so we didn't look at that. We just said, give us what's in the sort of plan library out there without respect to how often or how frequent they get used. But definitely some exotic stuff that with, maybe there's $1 up front and then you get an annuity of sign date or an annuity of switch date or some mixing of sign and switch, some mixing of a certain number of bills in as a triggering event. So some of the really complex stuff is where there's, a mix of triggering events that cause a payment to happen. especially, and then it's sort of a sliding window of term. So you're paying, you know, the first 12 months get paid out in 13, and then if this, and then that, and then maybe some other things. So the complexity of deals, I think, is something that we've seen maybe grow and then taper off a little bit over the years. I think if we look at the 80-20 of plans in use by volume, I would suspect that it's a handful of plans cover 80% of the deals. And then there's a very much a long tail effect, right? Where we look at the popularity of some of the more exotic plans. I think, again, just as a reminder.
Go back on that. I wanted to hit a couple too.
A couple
So
ideas
just on this, the last four bullets, just real quick, the last four bullets is more of what we're hearing in kind of the last month or two, and kind of this new normal with the COVID world. The tiered plans idea, lack of historical data with the new normal, that's just reality. I mean, there's so many ideas, even just about approaching the marketplace. How do you go and understand what your strategy is to go acquire customers? You can't base it on what we used to do with the historical. So we're creating a new normal and trying to understand that. You know, one of our customers talked about, could we vary a plan daily, literally, to incent people based on the changing definition of what's essential. You know, different states are coming out with, here's phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3. What is an essential business, and how do you define an essential business? And even if you are defined as an essential business, some of those business owners don't want to go within that standard definition of what essential is and do something different. So we don't even know how to define essential. And so that's a moving target. But if you can incent folks to say, hey, guess what? Every barbershop is now essential in phase 2. Let's go hit those, right? How do you build out what that strategy is? We're also seeing a lot more frequent questions about volume-based, right? It's like, I want to build a longer-term strategy with my partners and incent them, not only on a specific deal-by-deal basis, but also say, hey, I'm going to set up some bonus tiers. If you can get volume on a daily, weekly, monthly basis based on what you do, let's give you an extra added kicker on top of what we already built. That's something that seems to be more prevalent right now. And then last, it's just a mix of all of this stuff, right? As COVID waves continue, and I'm not sure how many people are really into the details, but you know, the reality is that this could hit, and you know, we could have more than one wave. This isn't just a singular event. So, you know, what's already ambiguous could get even more ambiguous as we keep going on. So that's some of the feedback we're getting from partners right now.
I think another kind of interesting trend in complexity that we're seeing, kind of piggybacking off of this idea of kind of a bonus or a payment that's not affiliated with a given deal, you know, that kind of creates a wild card. You know, traditionally when plans were simple, let's go back, you know, 10 years plus, you know, plans were simple. And what a salesperson's share of the plan payout was very easy. You know, if you got a percentage or a fee, you know, we could quickly unitize out and say, okay, this is the sales rep. So now I'm thinking about, you know, Sparkplug kind of sits both this, how the supplier paid the broker, and then how the broker pays the agent. And this is kind of the other side of the commissions coin. Is it used to be that virtually all sales commissions were tied directly to pay when paid methodology, meaning as I get paid, then I pay you. I think what we're seeing is definitely a trend. It's still not a majority, but certainly an upward trend in decoupling. Just as here you gave an example of payments decoupled from deals, it's more about there's another thing, which is the aggregate volume or something of that nature. And we're seeing kind of the same thing on the broker to salesperson side of commissions, which is I want to decouple potentially how I pay my agents, how I pay my salespeople, right? Whether they're outside or inside, it doesn't matter. I want to decouple that from how I get paid by the supplier. And that creates yet another sort of mathematical responsibility of the broker. Not only do they have to sort of track the accuracy of their supplier payments and the timeliness of their sort of sales downstream payments, they also have to sort of true up, you know, when I get this bonus, does the salesperson share in that or not? And then the same thing, I gave the salesperson an upfront bonus that I haven't even been paid out on, you know, now they all of a sudden have this sort of true up responsibility within their own pay, you know, receipt and payout cycle, just like a supplier might have as when the customer pays them and they pay their channel. So we're seeing some challenges kind of in the broker world as they decouple those things, and looking to create sort of volumetric or more kind of behavioral incentives versus deal by deal.
Yeah, Nate, you just you kind of described it, like, imagine trying to take all those words and what you just described and say, oh, I could put that in 2 cells in a spreadsheet. Like that is the use case for craft, right? Is to be able to make all that more configurable. And as you take 2 plans and merge them into a third, and then take that third, and it becomes this Frankenstein monster of a plan. But if you could configure it instead of trying to build it all in the spreadsheet, that was kind of what we saw with our customers, and why they said, hey, you should just make this into a software solution instead of trying to have the largest macro in the history of macros in a spreadsheet.
Absolutely. So just a reminder here, would love to see any crazy commission plans that you might have seen submitted via the Q&A. And Dave is going to buy you lunch virtually through a gift card. We'll,
yeah, just to clarify though, I'm not the only arbiter. We'll look at it afterwards. I think, Nate, you're going to send the deck out, right? And so we'll send out the winner. And for the record, like, please share your crazy ideas. Don't give numbers away. We want to keep it generic. We're not trying to share any unique secret sauce by any of our partners here.
We got one note in via the webinar chat. Been responding to a few folks, and then we do also have one question in from the audience as well for you guys.
Okay, yeah, we'll get there in a little bit.
Malcolm, thank you for your question. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. I think the bottom line here is, as Dave and I were talking, kind of in the broker commissions world and the supplier commissions world, I think the bottom line takeaway is, if everything was equal, brokers like to do business with the easiest suppliers to work with. And even when they're not equal, meaning maybe some suppliers are paying an accelerated plan and others are not, I think that easy button idea is still very prevalent, and headache factor is certainly frowned upon on both sides. I think you could say the same thing from the supplier perspective, right? They like to work with channels that are easy to work with. And keep the relationship as simple as possible, but not any simpler. As I think Einstein said, I like to think of the world as simple as possible, but not any simpler. So, I think these exotic plans they serve as a tool, but I think it's a two-edged sword with respect to the ability to actually calculate, enforce, and deliver on the promise of some of these plans. And, without a tool like Craft, I think there's a struggle to do that. And we, again, see the same thing on the broker side with agent style commissions and how they're doing exotic different types of splitting strategies and things like that within the brokerage itself. So here's a quote from, a broker CEO. This kind of a takeaway, here's a customer of ours that's been able to locate over 300 grand in the last 2 years of unpaid commissions and collect on that. And I think this maybe serves as both kind of a, what's the value of having a tool versus kind of the cells in the spreadsheet, as Dave was just referring, both on the supplier side and on the broker side, right? Which is, for every broker that got a commission that was unpaid collected, there was a supplier who didn't calculate it accurately, and or who made a plan that they couldn't necessarily deliver on, or maybe they thought they could, but sort of the internal spreadsheet tooling of that didn't actually play out in reality.
Yeah, and like you said, Nate, like we've seen the other side, right? Like I think even on the website, one of our customers said, they've overpaid by millions of dollars because they just couldn't figure it out without spending way too time. And sometimes they just write the checks because it's easier to write the checks than even try to figure out what is the reality, because by the time they figured out what the reality is, they probably would have wasted more time than some of those checks would have been worth.
I remember meeting with a supplier a couple of years ago, and they were describing their commissions process to us, and they said, we asked something like, do you pay on bill or on receipt? And they said, well, by the terms of our brokerage agreements, we're supposed to pay on receipt, but we can't actually get that data our commission spreadsheet doesn't handle that data, so we're just paying on bill now. And I just thought, like, does the CFO know about this? You think about the days of cash cost to pay on earlier than a receipt, plus not to mention the risk factor. I think that seems like a very great luxury, and I wonder about suppliers like that today that might be looking again at saying, wow, is there a way to do this better? And I imagine with the pressures of COVID, certainly. So Dave, how can suppliers and brokers, work more effectively on commissions?
Yeah, no, this is great. It's about an hour ago, a buddy of mine in St. Louis my first job out of college was with IBM, and the first day, the grizzled old sales managers from IBM took us out to lunch and said, hey, here's how you blow out the commission plan. Here's what you have to do. Here's what you need to do to sell. And so really that gets to the first bullet there. It's how do you build a commission plan that's a win-win, right? That's what we're trying to facilitate. If you look at both sides of the equation here, we really want to make this about acquiring customers that are good for all parties and make it fair and equitable on both sides. No one wants to overpay and no one wants to be underpaid. Let's assign the right value to both sides of the equation. I think the second bullet really talks about how do you mix in historical usage. I think that's just a really big underplayed thing. I mean, there's all these forecasting and pricing tools out there to try to understand what the market's all about, but it's all based on historical usage. Some of the big players could leverage the fact that they had more historical data than others, but the reality is I keep saying the new normal, but we just don't know what the world is going to look like going forward. And Malcolm, I appreciate that question. I was looking at some of the questions there. I think this third bullet is what you were looking to, right? It's like, how do you share the risk? If you look at one side or the other of the equation here, sometimes it's risk avoidance and trying to reduce the risk of customer acquisition, and no one wants to overpay, but at the same point you still want to do what's right for the customer. So there probably will be additional waves in COVID coming down. We just don't even know what the impact of working from home is, really across multiple fronts. It's not just the usage at the resi side, but we've talked to some businesses that say they're going to move to a model where their employees can work from home all the time. So that's going to have a significant impact on C&I and even small business. What is that going to look like? Think about, even small businesses where it's like, we're going to have barbers and salons and massages that are going to be in a work from home world instead of having a retail storefront. I mean, we just don't know how this is going to do. And so sharing the risk and trying to understand that we don't know that is another way that you can work more effectively together. On the fourth bullet, frankly, what we see, and I don't mean this to sound too much like a sales pitch, but bad spreadsheets really limits creativity. People let technology limit their ability to get creative, and that's just wrong. You should go and do what's right for the business and do what's right to go make a good relationship with customers and take care of the customers, and don't let limitations of technology slow you down and be able to be creative to go acquire new customers. And then at the end of the day, like, a lot of this is about transparency, right? We're trying to enable self-service. That's part of the original slide that Nate presented, where craft fits into the bigger picture of what you're trying to do. The more open we can be and transparent about it, that's it. A lot of our customers that we hear, it's like, the brokers need more information. Tell me more. Give me more details. Why do they get paid this way and how? Share that information and talk about it, because I think you could use that info to come up with even better plans going forward about how you can work together. And then my own little ad, hey, I've got a couple kids that are pretty big. In fact, one of them was born on Earth Day, and both of them are passionate about they're not even millennials. I guess, what are they? Gen Z? Is that the new one? But think about green power. Let's everyone should be incented for using green power. I'll get off the political platform, but let's do what's right. So anyway, these are just some bullets that we've heard.
A commission plan can be used to accomplish a business goal that isn't necessarily just market share, right? You have a business goal to drop off certain products, whether it's from a worldview or a stated sustainability goal or a market share change, right? There are all sorts of business goals, and the commissions plan really is just a tool to accomplish some bigger objective. And certainly, helping the environment would be a great example of one of those objectives that can be accomplished. So Q&A, we've got, let's see, we've got a question Dave kind of covered it. You know, Malcolm asked sort of about this deputized. How does suppliers deputize a broker and produce sort of an aligned behavior where if a customer is not paying their bills, then both the supplier and the broker stand to lose, right? Stand to lose out. So how do you create that win-win? Well, I think one of the things about commissions plans is that they can be this. What if there was a commission plan that incentivized signing customers that reliably pay their bills? Now, I had actually a supplier one time tell me that the best customer they could ever have was someone who reliably pays their bills late, because they make way better margins on late fees than on power. I don't know that that's true across the board, but certainly reliable payment is something that is critical to the industry. Credit is such a critical component of what makes this industry go. And without credit, we've seen even for a brief window of time when credit markets are not supported by revenue, sort of replenishing, that it can be crushing to a supplier. And then the fallout again is just felt right back in the broker world. So I think there's a natural symbiotic nature to keeping customers paying for the power that they consume. Dave, any thoughts about this alignment? Anything to add?
You know, just to expand a little bit, and I think we were alluding to this a little bit earlier, it's literally, it is the changing definition of essential. As you start to think about that, the definition of essential is going to change the dynamic of what a customer used to look like. So even if you know a certain industry type or geographic type, or, you know, even that customer, you know, specifically that, you know, as the definition of essential in the COVID times changes, that profile is also going to change that person's credit worthiness, or, you know, one way or the other. Some are going to get better, some are going to get worse, some may stay the same. But again, that gets to the transparency and the communication of what's the value of acquiring a certain customer set versus another one, and let's incent you accordingly. So I think that's aligned with what we've been saying.
Okay, fantastic. Let's see, I'm just going to check the chat, see if there are any questions there. I ended up not figuring out how to turn off the chat, so it looks like we've had a few questions. One question was the difference between Sparkplug and Craft. Thanks, Jason, for answering the chat. I'll just say, just for the sake of the video, Sparkplug, from a commissions perspective, Sparkplug is a broker platform. And our product Propeller on the supplier side is kind of an orchestration. You think about it as like a CRM that plugs into all the sort of specialty line of business systems that do CIS billing, EDI, pricing, credit, and so forth. And one of those systems is commissions. And Craft really is a specialist, as Dave said earlier, on calculating, managing, forecasting commissions in the supplier world, whether they're, I believe, direct or indirect sales channels commissions, right, Dave?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Sorry, I was looking at some of the other questions in the chat as well. I see one here that just says, any commission structures you have not been able to figure out?
No.
I would say, I mean, well, I was going to say the answer is no, but there's also a practicality to it, right? You can always figure out the commission structure. However, what happens is, you know, to be able to process it and do it and try to automate it as much as possible, that's where the real complexity lies in. It's like, you know, you could build a commission structure that's so complex operationally to execute it and pay upon it. You might as well not even build it, because it's going to cost you more to actually to take care of it. But at the end of the day, you can always figure out. To me, I'm an engineer and a math guy. I think it just ends up coming up with numbers at the end of the day, right? I don't know. Nate, what's your take? You find any that you haven't been able to figure out?
You know, I think I was just thinking about the short answer is no. There are some kind of stipulations in brokerage agreements that are very hard to get data to enforce. For example, there are some suppliers who manage their upfronts as a pool, or have done in the past. Regardless of what the plan is, annual upfront, $100 upfront, amount of upfront capital, they might say, hey, we're going to extend you a pool of up to 50 grand in upfront. And as soon as you hit that 50 grand, you're going to start getting paid residually. and it says that in the brokerage agreement, it's not really part of an individual plan sort of architecture. It's more of like an overarching business rule across the entire relationship. That's one that comes to mind. That's it's difficult for us to sort of access that data within a plan, within an individual plan design.
If I may as well, just to add in here, Ira, great question. And on top of what Nate's saying, that pool aspect, and then the other one that, again, we've been able to figure out, but it gives some brokers from a forecasting perspective a little bit of trouble, is when it's capped, meaning like it's, it's the deal term times annual volume paid up front, but we max it out at 10 grand. So then from a forecasting perspective, where do you put the rest of that? Is it residual? Is it based on a true up? And those are the ones that I feel like are at the end of the day, the confusing ones for brokers, but we've been able to figure those out as well.
I'd say though, the issue is less about can our commission system, which again has been in development for a decade. So it's very, very sophisticated. And as you saw, hundreds and multiple hundreds of plans that we have modeled over the years and implemented. And we're talking, again, I would say, I didn't look up the exact number, but I think it's close to 200 million in annual broker commissions that we're reconciling. So, we've seen a lot of plans. I think the issue is less about plan design and more about access to data. So this kind of gets back to a point that Dave made earlier, which is, hey, if suppliers and brokers were better at sharing data, I think some of these kind of uncertainties could go away. Meaning, in Jason's example, where there's a cap and we're uncertain about where the residual is, it's not like you're getting, well, let me say this. It's uncommon for suppliers to report on plans that are not actually being paid on this month. Now, some suppliers will have sort of a secondary component of their monthly, let's say monthly, again, commission statement, where they'll talk about, here's all the deals that you're not getting paid on this month, but have had activity. Maybe we received a payment, maybe a customer reneged on a payment, maybe we had a chargeback, whatever. And that data is helpful, but it's rare that we get really in the broker world a complete picture that would allow us to do things like this. I'm going to quickly answer a question. Are you able to handle clawbacks? And thanks, Ira, for that question. Are you able to handle clawbacks? I'll answer it from the Power Matrix side, and Dave, I think I know your answer, but I'm going to give you a chance to answer from the craft side. So clawbacks have several different aspects to them. Number one is sort of just how do you handle a negative payment against a deal or against another deal because a deal didn't pay out. So absolutely, clawbacks have been in our commission platform since its inception. The ability to flow those back through to an agent so that everyone shares. Again, it depends on how your agent plan is set up. As we talked about the sort of decoupling trend that we're seeing, but in a world of tightly coupled agent commissions, it's a very simple process. I think that with respect to handling clawbacks, this is also just highlights another data sharing challenge, which is, hey, what if I got $10,000 up front on a deal, and then I don't hear from that supplier in terms of how much usage is actually flowed on that deal until a year later, I just get a negative $2,000 charge against that deal. In other words, how could I have known that minus 2,000 was coming before it hit? And really the key thing there is usage data. You'd have to really know what flowed versus what the expected flow was and be able to sort of track that. Now, we do that when suppliers bring us the data, but again, the challenge is that it's certainly not universal or even prevalent that suppliers across the board, and we're managing nearly 100 different supplier remittance formats importing, that it's rare that data is consistently reported. So Dave, on the supplier side, are you able to handle clawbacks is the question.
Yes. No,
yeah,
I think, I mean, you brought up a lot of different, ideas about the different formats. I mean, that's one of the big powers of craft is to kind of reconcile the actuals and estimates. And more than anything is just to be completely transparent about why is there a clawback situation? How does the contract terms compare to what actually happened? and to be able to be transparent between the supplier and the broker so it's crystal clear. That's the more important one. Functionally, absolutely, that's one of the tenets of what we see. I think the more important part is just making sure, again, there's full transparency and understanding on a line item by line item basis why this occurred against the actual terms of the contract. So I think that's the important part. And you want to talk about that? I see the other question that's up there about suspending payments.
We have an anonymous question around, are any suppliers suspending payments due to their health? I don't, on the broker side, again, we've not seen this or been able to observe this happening. I personally, just as someone in the industry, don't know specifically about this. Dave, any thoughts on this?
We're starting to see some discussions about, delaying payments, negotiations of just saying, hey, our cash flow is lower and what can we do? Trying to be transparent about it. But there, even beyond just this industry and just industry wide, I think there's a lot of companies that are getting a lot of visibility. If they're getting, federal help and they're getting monies up front, you want to make sure that they are paying all their suppliers and their employees and whatnot. So I think there's a lot of visibility to it. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm seeing that trend again, industry-wide across all industries where there's some discussions about slowing down payments or delaying them. But hopefully there's still a promise of guaranteeing the payment and locking it in, but just saying, hey, I got to go to 60 or 90 days instead of 30 or immediate. So we are seeing a little bit coming, but nothing impactful totally yet.
Yeah, so maybe it's not necessarily a specific announcement that's been made by suppliers, but maybe it's stretching out of terms, credit terms on payments that are owed. And I think Energy Choice Matters had an article about a supplier that was maybe contemplating this, but I haven't seen anything that's sort of definitive. We're not paying brokers until further notice from any supplier.
Yeah, I think the bigger thing right now is some of the true ups that might have happened. If businesses are going under and you did a bigger upfront based on anticipated 12-month usage, and it's not going to happen because of what happened. So I think, again, that needs to be a transparent discussion, because I think, Malcolm, your question earlier is how could brokers and the suppliers work together? I think it's both sides of it. I mean, we're all in this together. I think that's the biggest thing that I feel is coming out of COVID, is we really need to think about this as a whole. And from a technology perspective, I think that's where Jason and Nate and I are coming from, is we feel the technology that we're bringing to the market is going to enable more transparency and more collaboration across that whole supply chain. So we hope that trend continues even beyond everything that's COVID. So.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you everyone for participating today. As usual, we will be announcing the next week's panelists and content. Just a reminder of what we do. Sparkplug enables brokers in the cloud. We've announced kind of our stimulus package, kind of in alignment with many CRM companies out there, which is that we're offering kind of the work from home add-ons to Sparkplug as free to all of our customers that are on contract with us, basically until COVID kind of is, at least we see some lights at the end of the tunnel. Thanks for joining today. Next Thursday, as a reminder, we'll have John Bennett and a couple of other suppliers on a panel just talking about supplier challenges during COVID. Thanks to Energy Harbor and John for jumping on next week, and we'll be sending out invitations. Please do send us your ideas. Send us your ideas if you have topics that you'd like to hear about. Thanks again, Dave and the craft team, for participating today. Great to hear your expertise and experience, and thanks to all the attendees.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great week.